Shannon, you got a crazy game going on this weekend with the Steelers against the Bengals, and Ben Roethlisberger and other players are in quarantine of some form or fashion, right? What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, the same thing, Clay, is just like, I mean, it's crazy, right? I checked Twitter yesterday and saw that a handful of those players, including, of course, Ben, are all in the COVID reserve list. It sounds to me like maybe they had close contact with somebody. So, again, it'll be testing all week long, and it could come down to the last minute for these guys to see if they're going to get on the field. It's the world we live in. Like, I wait every week for my COVID results to come back, to see like, all right, I'm good for another week. All right, I'm good for another week, just because nobody knows. You just don't know, like, walking around doing things. Obviously, I'm doing everything I can to be safe. But it's just one of those things. We're all living in this world right now and kind of moving through it together.
How often do you get tested for your being on the sideline and traveling for games?
Every week, and I would actually get tested more if I needed to, because I feel like I have my kids here, I have my husband here. I am obviously doing things that are outside of what most people are doing. I'm traveling every week. I'm in stadiums where there are fans now. Obviously, we do everything we possibly can in our meeting rooms. We're separated. We have masks on. We limit the amount of people that are in cars driving to and from the stadium. We don't go out to dinner on the road anymore. I'm wearing masks from the time I leave my hotel room in the morning on Sunday to the time I walk in my house. I have a mask on Sunday. So we're certainly doing everything that we can. But again, we just don't know how this virus moves around.
We're talking to Shannon Spake. You can follow her on Twitter at Shannon Spake. It's also Veterans Day, Shannon, and
Yes.
I saw you posting. This is a big day for you. Your dad was a fighter pilot, and
Yes.
your at least one of your grandfathers fought in World War II and is still living. Tell us about both those guys.
Yeah, my mother's father was at Normandy. My dad's father is 96 years old. Papa, he's amazing. He fought in the Battle of Leyte and was in World War II. He was a paratrooper. We've talked about this many times. How he jumped out of the plane only his second time up in the air at 19 years old.
That's absolutely insane.
Yes, and my dad was a fighter pilot, flew F-4s. My mom was actually in the Navy. That's how my dad and mom met. She was working at the airfield, and they met in Meridian, Mississippi, and got married, and that's where I was born. So I remember growing up, we would go to tons of change of commands up in Jacksonville. We would drive from South Florida to Jacksonville to watch the change of commands. I have my dad's helmet. I have my dad's flight suits. I have my dad's boots that he wore in Vietnam. So certainly, and obviously with the Ironman stuff, I've met so many incredible veterans through the Ironman Foundation. They have a Gold Star initiative in the Ironman Foundation where a friend of mine who started this, he runs with an American flag the entire run portion and then hands it to a Gold Star family as he crosses the finish line. And so it means everything. Thank you to all of the veterans out there. My life would be so different without you, and so there's no way for me to express how much thanks I have for the sacrifices that you make.
Well, thanks to your family as well and all the other veterans that are listening to us right now. I want to go back to your grandfather who's 96 years old because I do
God
think this
bless him.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a phenomenal story. And I know you every now and then have shared pictures with him on social media. But what is amazing, like he was staining his own deck, right? Isn't that one of the pictures you shared recently?
Yep. Yeah, he still gets it done. He still walks his property and does what he needs to do. And yeah, he is amazing. And as I've told you before, Clay, I really do not think I've ever seen that man have a bad day. Like the things that he went through as a young man, not only the war, but I mean, they lost a child at a young age. My grandmother suffered with some illnesses, and I've never seen him have a bad day. He was a tile layer in the city of Chicago, laid tile for probably all of the buildings in Chicago, worked his butt off, right? And again, he's always had a smile on his face.
So one of the things so I read and have read a lot about World War II, and we've talked. This is one of the things we've talked about, and a lot of these guys. And you mentioned that your grandfather was one of the paratroopers. I mean, these guys, and this is just a crazy thing to think about. Think about in your own life out there listening to us right now, how common it is for people to still be afraid of flying. Right? There are still a lot of people out there. Airplane takes off, they want to take a Dramamine, they want to take a drink, they want, they are just still super nervous. Many of the paratroopers the very first time they had ever been in an airplane, because you got to think back into the 1940s, how often were people on airplanes in the 1940s? Not that often. It was still something very much that a rich person, by and large, would do. The very first time many of these guys had ever been in an airplane, they jumped out of it. I mean, this is just like the Band of Brothers, the story there is that a huge percentage of the guys who went up to be paratroopers, the very first time they had ever been in an airplane, they jumped out of it. And you just said that your grandfather, who was 19, the second time he was in an airplane, he jumped out of it.
Could you imagine asking
no, I legitimately can't even imagine. I wouldn't jump out of an airplane now, and I've been on a lot of airplanes. The very first time or the second time that you go up in an airplane, you are brave enough, you have the stones to jump out of an open window in an airplane? Are you kidding me?
No, I mean, and could you even, could 18, 19-year-olds, a majority of them today, I don't think would do the same thing. Obviously, there are some that go to war for us and do enter the military and do the same things, right? But not me. I couldn't but not
volunteers.
Doing it.
We're talking about people who are, full-time military. We're talking about people who volunteered to go fight in a war.
Yeah.
Like, this was the entire population, basically, of that generation. Not like we have now, a small number, and thank you for your service, but it's a small number of the overall population that joins the military. We're talking about basically just grabbing the entirety of eligible adult males and throwing them all into a war against Nazis and saying, hey, you're going to go jump out of airplanes. This isn't some small group that's self-selecting to be fighting in a war. This is the nation as a whole.
Growing up, I heard so many stories from the war from my grandfather. He nightmares still to this day from World War II. And when I was younger, those stories seemed very light, where he fell asleep in a foxhole and the enemy walked over and thought that he was dead and kicked him and went by and he wasn't dead. And when you're a young kid, these stories seem very kind of like you're reading it in a book. As you get older and you become an adult, you realize how close my grandfather was to not surviving.
Which would mean that you wouldn't exist, obviously.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So you start to realize the enormity of it and what it really means to be a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid and to sacrifice what they sacrificed, regardless of why they did it or what the generation was. They still went over there and fought for our country, and many, many, many lost their lives.
There's no doubt. We're talking to Shannon Spake on Veterans Day here at Shannon Spake. You can find her on Twitter. And it sounds, like let's shift back to sports now. Obviously, much less significant in the grand scheme of things. But the reason that we have sports is because of the sacrifices that many people make still to this day to represent our country and keep us safe. And sports now, NASCAR finished their season, right? So NASCAR, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, a lot of people said it couldn't be done. Props to NASCAR for joining the next in those lines and being able to get it done.
Yeah, and we got every single race in. We did it obviously a little bit different. We were talking on the show. I did Race Hub last night. It was my last show for the season. We were talking about how this 2020 season, we've progressed in so many ways. I've covered this sport for 2 decades, and the things that we've done, a lot of times our hands were forced to do it because of COVID, but the things that we've done, not only because of schedules or no practice or no qualifying, but just from a social standpoint as well, with the Bubba Wallace stuff, with the removal of the Confederate flag, our sport came so far in 2020. And then at the end of the day, the sport's most popular driver, Chase Elliott, he wins the championship. For Hendrick Motorsports, in Jimmy Johnson's last race, last full-time season, sort of handing the torch over to Chase Elliott, I don't think we could have written a better script for the end of the season than we did to have Chase Elliott win this championship. It's a huge, huge victory for the sport.
And NASCAR now basically finishes around the same time it was supposed to, right? So
the
now
exact
you get
same time.
Exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get to wait, come back for Daytona in February, and theoretically, hopefully, things will be better in February than they were for this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did get the Daytona 500 in last year. Thankfully,
Normally,
we had
yes.
fans. Yes, remember we had President Trump there, and,
Yep.
and that was when Ryan Newman got in the big wreck and almost lost his life in that wreck. But yes, we were able to get to Daytona 500. Again, I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm sure that they will push to have fans there. I know Florida is a lot looser with some of their restrictions than other states. But it would be a big loss if we don't have fans in the stands for the Daytona 500.
All right, so let's circle back around to the NFL. The Steelers, so the NFL has announced now that they will play 16 teams will make the playoff if they have to cancel any games, right? This is a new addition. They're going to have 7 this year, they've already announced, which is the biggest playoff field ever. They potentially will expand to have 16 teams total, 8 in the NFC and 8 in the AFC. Do you feel like every NFL game, this is what we were all just talking about, will get played this season, or will they have to cancel any? I feel like they're going to have to cancel some before all is said and done. We're halfway through. So far, they've been able to move the schedule around and adjust and still be able to get everything in. Do you feel like they will be 100% every team will play 16 games?
The optimist in me would like to say yes, would love to say that I think that every game is going to get in, even if it means like a Monday night or a Tuesday night.
Right.
But I think with the bye weeks, sort of the teams are out of bye weeks, right?
Yeah.
And we're running out of weeks that we can fill in. So I think it's going to be really tough. I think every week we go, oh my gosh, we made it another week. It's week 10. This is awesome. We made it another week. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But I do think it's a meaningful games, right? So it's a game if it's something on the line. I just don't think that those like the playoff teams will go if it's not a meaningful game. And I do think I read into that where some teams might have a bye week or less games, and some teams might have more games under this new rule, which that's one thing I have a hard time with. With the injuries in the NFL, I think everyone should play the same amount of games, obviously without the playoffs sort of involved in that. And so that would be the one thing that I would be concerned about. But I think if we do make it to the end of the season with all of the games intact, I mean, it's a huge feat that we did, because again, everything is changing. We don't know week to week. I feel like at the beginning we had the first player, AJ Terrell, on the Falcons who hit the COVID list when I did that game. That was the first player that hit the COVID list during that game, and now it's happening every single week, and significant ones like Ben Roethlisberger and Cam Newton.
Yeah, and not only for the game you've got, the Steelers hosting the Bengals this weekend, I mean, it could be a major decision-making situation for teams, right? Because usually teams fight so aggressively to get those 2 byes. This year, we theoretically only have 1 bye, and if that bye is going to disappear and everybody's going to have to win 3 games in order to advance in the playoffs, then there may be a lot of guys who decide, a lot of teams that decide, hey, we need to figure out how to balance out the workload on our team, because we've got to be capable of winning 3 games in the postseason in order to get to the Super Bowl, which usually never occurs for the first and second seeded teams, which is why resting becomes such a big contemplated part of the NFL schedule down the stretch. It may be even more of the case now that every team would have to win 3 games.
Not even a question. And I mean, you look at like Ben Roethlisberger, you look at Tom Brady, you look at Drew Brees, you look at these older quarterbacks who need that, right? I mean, they have a lot of wear and tear. You look at some of the running, I mean, like just the wear and tear that these guys put on their body every single week. You know, you talk to guys that, how did you spend your bye week? I got treatment. I laid low. I took care of my body. I did what I needed to do. I recovered. Little tiny things here and there that just pop up. I mean, they're battling through small things all the time, and sometimes big things that they're battling through. Those bye weeks are incredibly important for these teams, especially as they try to make a run for the Super Bowl.
Shannon, I appreciate everything that your family has done. Thank your grandfather. Thank your dad, your mom as well. Thanks for coming on with us. Good timing on Veterans Day, and enjoy that Bengals-Steelers game, and we'll be watching.